Marcus Chen had been working at the Galactic Research Station for 3 years, but he never expected his life to change because of a simple hug. The station orbited a gas giant in the Zephyr system, studying alien biology and fostering interspecies cooperation. Marcus worked as a supervisor in the xenobiology department, managing research projects and making sure different alien species could work together peacefully. The Draconian Empire was one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Their people looked like massive dragons with scales that shimmered in different colors, wings that could span 30 feet, and eyes that glowed like stars. They were proud, intelligent, and had never been conquered by anyone. When the Empire agreed to send their royal hatchlings to the research station for education, everyone was nervous. Emperor Vorthak himself had made the decision. His 3 children would spend 6 months learning about other species and galactic cooperation. The hatchlings were Zara, Keth, and Nyx. Each was about the size of a large horse, even though they were still considered babies by Draconian standards. Their scales changed colors based on their emotions, and they could breathe small jets of fire when excited or angry. Marcus was chosen to supervise their education because of his calm personality and experience with different alien species. The station director, a blue-skinned Centaurian named Dr. Vels, pulled Marcus aside before the hatchlings arrived. "These are not ordinary students, Marcus," Dr. Vels said, her tentacles writhing nervously. "They are royalty. One wrong move could start a war. The Draconians have never trusted other species with their young before." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility. "I'll treat them with respect, but also make sure they learn what they came here to learn." When the Draconian transport ship arrived, it was bigger than 3 research vessels combined. The hatchlings emerged with a group of guards and advisors. Zara had golden scales that sparkled in the station's lights. Keth's scales were deep blue with silver edges. Nyx was the smallest, with black scales that seemed to absorb light. The adult Draconians were formal and cold. They spoke to Marcus like he was barely worth their time. "Human," said General Thane, the lead guardian. "You will ensure our young ones are safe. Any harm that comes to them will be answered with fire." Marcus bowed respectfully. "I understand, General. They will be treated as honored guests and students." The first few days were challenging. The hatchlings were curious but also arrogant. They expected special treatment and didn't want to follow the station's rules. During their first lesson about interspecies cooperation, Zara breathed fire at a holographic display when she disagreed with something. "This is stupid," she declared, her scales turning bright red with anger. "Draconians don't need to cooperate with lesser species." Marcus remained calm. "That attitude is exactly why you're here to learn. Every species has something valuable to offer." Keth snorted, a small puff of smoke coming from his nostrils. "What could humans possibly teach us? You can't even fly." Instead of getting angry, Marcus smiled. "You're right, I can't fly. But I can do things you can't do too. Would you like to see?" The hatchlings looked curious despite themselves. Marcus led them to the station's workshop, where he began building a small device using his hands and simple tools. His fingers moved quickly and precisely, creating something the hatchlings had never seen before. "What is that?" Nyx asked, her scales shifting to a curious purple color. "It's a music box," Marcus explained. "Humans create things like this for beauty and joy, not just for power or conquest." He wound up the device and it began playing a soft, melodic tune. The hatchlings had never heard anything like it. Their scales shifted to calmer colors as they listened, mesmerized by the simple beauty of the music. Over the next few weeks, Marcus continued to surprise them. He showed them human art, told them stories about Earth's history, and demonstrated human problem-solving skills. Unlike the formal lessons they received from their tutors, Marcus made learning fun and interactive. The breakthrough came during their 4th week at the station. There was an emergency in the lower levels when a containment field failed in one of the laboratories. Dangerous energy was leaking out and everyone was evacuated. Marcus was helping coordinate the evacuation when he realized the hatchlings were missing. He found them huddled together in a storage room, their scales pale with fear. The emergency sirens were loud and frightening, and they were far from their guards and familiar faces. For the first time since arriving, they looked like what they really were, scared children. Without thinking, Marcus rushed to them. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "You're safe here." Zara was shaking, her golden scales flickering between different colors. "The noise," she whispered. "It reminds me of the attack on our moon colony last year." Marcus knelt down next to them, making himself smaller and less threatening. "I know it's scary, but I promise you're safe. The emergency is far from here and it's almost contained." Keth moved closer to Marcus, his blue scales trembling. "Our guards left us. They probably went to get help," Marcus said gently. "But I'm here now and I won't leave you." Without thinking about protocol or the potential consequences, Marcus opened his arms and pulled all three hatchlings into a hug. His human arms barely reached around their scaled bodies, but he held them as tight as he could. The effect was immediate and unexpected. The hatchlings' scales began to glow with warm, soft colors. Their trembling stopped, and they pressed closer to Marcus, making soft, rumbling sounds he had never heard from draconians before. "You smell like safety," Nyx whispered, her small voice filled with wonder. Marcus held them until the emergency was over and their guards returned. When General Thane found them, his expression was shocked. No alien had ever dared to touch draconian royalty so casually, and he expected to see the hatchlings angry or offended. Instead, they were calm and content, their scales glowing with peaceful colors. They didn't want to leave Marcus's side. "What did you do to them?" General Thane demanded. "I comforted them," Marcus said simply. "They were scared." The general stared at him for a long moment, then at the hatchlings who were still pressed close to the human. Something had changed and everyone could feel it. The hatchlings looked at Marcus with new eyes, as if they had discovered something precious and rare. From that moment on, everything was different. The proud, arrogant young draconians who had arrived at the station were gone, replaced by three hatchlings who followed Marcus everywhere and hung on his every word. The change in the hatchlings was immediate and dramatic. Where they had once been distant and proud, they now followed Marcus everywhere like loyal pets. Their guards and tutors were baffled by the transformation. General Thane watched with growing concern as the young royals ignored their traditional lessons in favor of spending time with their human supervisor. Marcus, Zara would call out every morning when she saw him in the corridors. Her golden scales would brighten to a warm yellow glow that the draconian guards had never seen before. "What are we learning today?" The other researchers on the station noticed the change too. Dr. Vels pulled Marcus aside during his lunch break, her blue tentacles twitching with worry. "Marcus, I'm getting reports that the hatchlings refuse to attend their scheduled lessons unless you're present," she said. "Their tutors are very upset. Some are saying you've used some kind of human mind control." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "Mind control? I just hugged them when they were scared. I treat them like any other students." "That's exactly the problem," Dr. Vels replied. "Draconians don't treat their young the way humans do. Physical affection is rare in their culture, especially from strangers. You may have accidentally triggered some kind of bonding response." Before Marcus could respond, Keth appeared in the doorway of the cafeteria. His blue scales were dark with distress and small wisps of smoke curled from his nostrils. "Marcus," he called out, relief flooding his voice when he spotted his supervisor. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "What's wrong, Keth?" Marcus asked, standing up from his table. "The tutor wants us to study ancient battle tactics, but it's boring without you there to explain things," Keth said, moving closer to Marcus. "You make everything interesting. You show us why things matter instead of just telling us to memorize facts." Dr. Vels watched this interaction with fascination. The young draconian's body language was completely different from what she had observed in the species before. Usually, draconians stood tall and proud, keeping distance between themselves and others. But Keth was leaning toward Marcus, almost like he was seeking comfort from the human's presence. "Keth, you should listen to your tutors," Marcus said gently. "They have important knowledge to share with you." "But they don't explain things the way you do," Keth protested. "When Tutor Grimac tells us about the Battle of Xerion, he just lists facts and dates. When you tell us about human conflicts, you help us understand why people fought and what they learned from it." Marcus realized he had a bigger problem than he had thought. "Where are Zara and Nyx?" "They're hiding in the observation deck," Keth admitted. "Zara said she won't come out until you promise to sit with us during lessons." Dr. Vels made a clicking sound with her tentacles, the Centaurian equivalent of a sigh. "Marcus, you need to fix this. The Draconian delegation is starting to ask questions." Marcus found Zara and Nyx in the observation deck, curled up together near the large windows that showed the gas giant below. Their scales were dim and sad-looking, nothing like the bright colors they displayed when happy. "Hey," Marcus said softly as he approached them. "Keth told me you're upset about your lessons." Zara lifted her golden head and her scales immediately began to brighten. "Marcus, we missed you. The tutors are angry with us, but we don't care. We only want to learn from you." Nyx, the smallest of the three, pressed her dark scales against Marcus's leg. "You make us feel safe," she said in her quiet voice. "The others just make us feel small and stupid." Marcus knelt down to their level, something that would have been unthinkable for most species when dealing with draconian royalty. "Listen to me, all of you. Your tutors have knowledge that I don't have. They can teach you about your own history and culture in ways that I can't. But they don't care about us the way you do," Zara said, her scales shifting to a pleading orange color. "They see us as future rulers who must be perfect. You see us as people who are learning and growing." The truth of her words hit Marcus hard. He had been treating the hatchlings like any other students, giving them patience and understanding when they made mistakes. In draconian culture, young royals were expected to be perfect from birth. They were never allowed to show weakness or ask for help without being seen as failures. "Your people have different ways of showing care," Marcus explained. "Just because they're stricter doesn't mean they don't want what's best for you." "Maybe," Keth said, joining them on the observation deck. "But we've never felt the way we feel around you. You make us want to be better, not because we're afraid of punishment, but because we want to make you proud." This was becoming more complicated than Marcus had expected. He could see that the hatchlings had formed an emotional attachment to him that went beyond normal student-teacher relationships. In human terms, it was almost like they had imprinted on him as a parental figure. The situation became even more complex when General Thane arrived with two other draconian officials. Their scales were dark with displeasure, and their eyes glowed with suppressed anger. "Human Supervisor," General Thane said formally, "we need to discuss the behavior of the young ones." Marcus stood up, but the hatchlings immediately moved to surround him, their scales bright with protective colors. It was clear they saw the adult draconians as a threat to their bond with Marcus. "Of course, General," Marcus replied. "What concerns do you have?" "They refuse to follow traditional protocols," said Commander Vex, one of the other officials. "They question every lesson, demand explanations for every rule, and show emotional responses that are inappropriate for royal heirs. They're learning to think critically," Marcus said carefully. "Isn't that valuable?" "Not when it undermines proper discipline," General Thane replied. "Draconian young must learn obedience and strength. Your methods are making them soft." Zara's scales flashed bright red, and she stepped forward aggressively. "We're not soft. Marcus teaches us to be strong in different ways. He shows us that strength comes from understanding, not just from following orders blindly." The adult draconians were shocked by her outburst. Royal hatchlings were never supposed to speak to their elders that way, especially not in defense of an alien. "You see," Commander Vex said to Marcus, "this is what your influence has done to them. They have no respect for proper authority." "I respect Marcus's authority," Nyx said quietly, but her voice carried clearly in the tense silence. "He's never wrong because he admits when he doesn't know something and finds the answers with us." Marcus realized that the situation was spiraling beyond his control. The hatchlings had developed such strong loyalty to him that they were willing to defy their own people's traditions. This could create a diplomatic crisis that might affect human-draconian relations for generations. But as he looked at the three young draconians who trusted him so completely, he also felt a deep responsibility to protect their growth and happiness. They had opened their hearts to him in a way that was apparently unprecedented in their culture, and he couldn't betray that trust. The standoff continued, with the adult draconians growing more agitated and the hatchlings becoming more protective of their human supervisor. Marcus knew he had to find a solution that would satisfy both sides, but it seemed impossible to bridge the gap between human compassion and draconian tradition. The tension in the observation deck was thick enough to cut with a blade. Marcus could see that General Thane was losing patience, while the hatchling's protective stance around him was only making things worse. He needed to defuse the situation before it exploded into something that could damage relations between humans and the Draconian Empire. "General Thane," Marcus said calmly, "perhaps we could find a compromise. What if I attended some of the traditional lessons to observe? That way the hatchlings can learn from their tutors while still having me present." Absolutely not, Commander Vex snapped. This is about draconian heritage and royal education. No alien should be present during such sacred teachings. Zara's scales flashed dangerously bright, and small flames began to curl from her nostrils. Then we won't attend them at all. Zara, calm down, Marcus said gently, placing a hand on her scaled shoulder. The effect was immediate. Her flames died down and her scales shifted to a calmer gold color. General Thane watched this interaction with fascination and growing alarm. He had never seen young draconians respond so quickly to emotional guidance, especially from a non-draconian. In their culture, emotional control was learned through years of strict discipline and meditation. How do you do that? General Thane asked quietly. Do what? Marcus replied, confused. Calm them so easily. Our most experienced trainers use fear and punishment to teach emotional control. You simply touch them and speak softly, and they respond immediately. Marcus realized that this might be his opportunity to help the Draconians understand the difference between their methods and his approach. In human culture, we believe that children learn better when they feel safe and supported. Fear might create obedience, but it doesn't create understanding or genuine growth. Humans raise weak offspring, Commander Vex declared. That's why your species was easily conquered in the early galactic wars. Actually, Keth interjected, surprising everyone with his confident tone, Marcus has been teaching us about human military history. Humans weren't conquered because they were weak. They were outnumbered and had less advanced technology, but they fought harder than anyone expected because they were fighting to protect their families and homes, not just following orders. The adult Draconians looked shocked. Royal hatchlings were not supposed to correct their elders or offer contradictory information during formal discussions. Marcus taught us about the Battle of Thermopylae, Nyx added, her quiet voice carrying surprising strength. 300 Spartans held off thousands of enemies because they chose to fight, not because they were forced to. That's a different kind of strength. General Thane's expression was unreadable. You taught them about human warfare? I taught them about courage, sacrifice, and the power of making choices based on principles rather than fear, Marcus replied. These concepts exist in every culture, including Draconian culture. But you made them think about these concepts instead of simply memorizing them, General Thane said slowly, as if working through a difficult puzzle. Before Marcus could respond, an emergency alert sounded throughout the station. Dr. Vels's voice came over the communication system, tense with urgency. All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple pirate ships approaching. This is not a drill. The observation deck erupted into controlled chaos. The Draconian guards immediately moved to protect the hatchlings. While Marcus activated his emergency protocols as a station supervisor, all hatchlings must return to the secure quarters immediately, General Thane commanded. But the young Draconians had other ideas. Instead of following their guards, they moved closer to Marcus, their scales bright with determination. We want to help, Zara declared. Marcus, what can we do? You need to go to safety, Marcus said firmly. The secure quarters are the best place for you right now. But you're not going to the secure quarters, Keth observed. You're going to help with the emergency response. Marcus paused. The hatchlings were right. As a supervisor, he was required to help coordinate the station's response to the threat. But he couldn't take Royal Draconian children into a potentially dangerous situation. This is different, Marcus explained. I have training and responsibilities. You're students and you need to stay safe. We have training too, Nyx said quietly. We're Draconian royalty. We've been learning combat and strategy since we could walk. General Thane looked torn between his duty to protect the hatchlings and his growing realization that they might actually be capable of helping. Draconian children were indeed trained for combat from an early age, but they had never been allowed to participate in real emergencies. The station shook slightly as the pirate ships came closer. Through the observation deck windows, they could see the dark shapes of enemy vessels approaching the research station. How many ships? Marcus asked, activating his communication device. 7 pirate vessels, came Dr. Vell's response. They're demanding we surrender all research data and valuable cargo. Our defense systems are online, but we're outgunned. Marcus's mind raced through the station's capabilities and limitations. The research station wasn't designed for major battles, but it had some defensive systems and the ability to call for help from nearby Allied vessels. General Thane, Marcus said suddenly, how long would it take for Draconian military ships to reach us? Approximately 2 hours, the general replied. But why would they respond to defend a research station? Because their royal heirs are on board, Marcus said. And because this station represents galactic cooperation, which the Empire has publicly supported. Zara's scales brightened with excitement. You want to call our father's fleet? I want to buy us time until help arrives, Marcus corrected. But that means we need to hold off 7 pirate ships for 2 hours with limited defenses. The adult Draconians looked skeptical, but the hatchlings were practically vibrating with energy. They had never been included in strategic planning before, and Marcus's willingness to discuss the situation with them like equals was both thrilling and empowering. What if we could make the station look more dangerous than it really is? Keth suggested. Pirates are usually cowards who only attack targets they think are easy. Marcus looked at the young Draconian with surprise. What do you have in mind? Draconians are naturally intimidating, Keth explained. What if we made it look like the station has a full military escort? But we don't have warships, Commander Vex pointed out. No, Nick said thoughtfully, but we have the hatchlings of the Draconian Emperor, and we have Marcus who taught us that sometimes the appearance of strength is as effective as actual strength. General Thane stared at the smallest hatchling, then at Marcus. What exactly have you been teaching them? I've been teaching them to think, Marcus replied. And right now they might be thinking their way to a solution that could save all our lives. The plan that emerged from the desperate brainstorming session was both brilliant and insane. Marcus found himself coordinating between the hatchlings' creative thinking and the adults' practical knowledge, creating a strategy that no one would have imagined possible just hours earlier. Let me understand this correctly, Dr. Vels said over the communication system, her voice tight with disbelief. You want to use the hatchlings as bait? Not bait, Marcus corrected from the station's command center where he had been allowed to coordinate the plan. As a deterrent. Pirates are opportunistic. They attack research stations because they expect easy targets with valuable cargo and minimal defenses. Zara, standing beside him with her scales glowing bright gold with excitement, continued the explanation. But they don't expect to find Draconian royalty on board. If they know we're here, they'll have to consider whether stealing research data is worth starting a war with the Empire. The station shook again as the pirate ships moved closer. Through the main viewing screen, they could see the 7 vessels spreading into attack formation. The largest ship, clearly the command vessel, was sending repeated demands for surrender. This is Captain Vork of the Red Claw Raiders, came a harsh voice over the communication channel. Surrender all research data and valuable materials or we will take them by force. You have 10 minutes to comply. General Thane looked uncomfortable with the entire plan. Using royal hatchlings in a military operation goes against every protocol we have. But they're not really in danger, Marcus pointed out. They'll be safely in the command center communicating with the pirates. We're counting on the pirates' fear of draconian retaliation, not on the hatchlings' fighting ability. Keth stepped forward, his blue scales shifting to a confident steel color. General, we've spent weeks learning about strategy and diplomacy from Marcus. This is a chance to put that knowledge to use. And if it doesn't work? Commander Vex asked. Then we fight with everything we have until the Imperial fleet arrives, Nick said quietly. But this gives us the best chance of avoiding bloodshed altogether. Marcus was amazed at how the hatchlings had grown in confidence and strategic thinking. A few weeks ago, they had been arrogant children who expected others to solve their problems. Now they were actively participating in planning their own rescue. Dr. Vels, Marcus said into his communicator, are you ready to implement the technical aspects of the plan? The engineering team has programmed the deception protocols, came the reply. We can make our energy signatures look like we have escort vessels for about 30 minutes before the pirates figure out it's a trick. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The station's computers would project false energy signatures that would appear on pirate scanners as draconian warships. Meanwhile, the hatchlings would make direct contact with the pirate captain, identifying themselves as royal heirs and demanding that the pirates withdraw or face the consequences. Captain Vork, Marcus said, opening a communication channel to the lead pirate ship. Before you do something you'll regret, you should know exactly what you're attacking. The view screen flickered to life, showing a scarred reptilian face with burning red eyes. Captain Vork looked like he belonged to one of the aggressive species from the Outer Rim territories. Research station, you have 8 minutes remaining. Nothing you can say will change our demands. What if I told you that you're about to attack the children of Emperor Vorthak? Marcus said calmly. Captain Vork's expression didn't change immediately, but Marcus could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You're lying. Imperial heirs don't travel on research stations. Zara stepped into view of the communication screen, her golden scales bright and unmistakably draconian. Hello, Captain Vork. I am Princess Zara, eldest daughter of Emperor Vorthak. These are my brothers, Prince Keth and Prince Nyx. The pirate captain's jaw dropped as Keth and Nyx also appeared on screen. There was no mistaking their royal bearing, or the distinctive scale patterns that marked them as members of the imperial family. This is impossible, Captain Vork muttered, but his voice had lost its confident edge. Check your long-range scanners. Captain, Nyx said in her quiet but clear voice. You'll find that imperial warships are already moving to intercept you. My father doesn't take kindly to threats against his children. Marcus watched the pirate captain's face as his crew presumably checked their instruments. The fake energy signatures that Dr. Vels's team had created would show up as massive draconian battleships moving toward their position. Captain, came a panicked voice from somewhere. Off-screen on the pirate ship. We're detecting multiple Imperial vessels approaching fast. They'll be here in less than 2 hours. Captain Vork's face had gone pale. Pirates might be willing to fight research station security, but no one in their right mind wanted to face the Imperial Navy. Draconian warships were among the most powerful in the galaxy, and their crews were known for showing no mercy to those who threatened the royal family. You're bluffing, Captain Vork said, but his voice lacked conviction. The Emperor's children wouldn't be on a human research station. We're here as part of a cultural exchange program, Keth explained, his scales bright with confidence. Learning about cooperation between species, something you clearly know nothing about. Marcus was impressed by how naturally the hatchlings had taken to diplomatic intimidation. They were using their royal status like a weapon, but doing it with intelligence and strategy rather than simple arrogance. Captain Vork, Zara continued, I suggest you withdraw immediately. My father is already displeased with the increase in piracy in this sector. If you attack a station where his children are guests, he will personally hunt down every member of your crew. The view screen showed Captain Vork conferring urgently with his officers. Marcus could see the fear growing in their eyes as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. Even if you are royal heirs, Captain Vork said desperately, you're still on this station. If we destroy it, the Imperial fleet won't arrive in time to save you. The hatchlings exchanged glances, and Marcus saw something in their expressions that made him both proud and slightly worried. They had moved beyond following his strategy and were now improvising on their own. Captain, Nyx said softly, if you harm us, my father won't just destroy your ships. He'll turn every system in this sector into a hunting ground. Every pirate base, every hidden port, every safe haven you've ever used will be reduced to space dust. The Emperor has a very long memory and unlimited resources. The silence stretched for several long moments. Marcus could feel the tension in the command center as everyone waited to see if their desperate gamble would work. Finally, Captain Vork spoke again, his voice defeated. Red Claw Raiders withdraw to jump distance. We're leaving this sector. The pirate ships began to pull back, their formation dissolving as they prepared to flee. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew they weren't safe yet. The fake energy signatures wouldn't fool anyone for much longer, and they still needed to survive until real help arrived. The relief in the command center was short-lived. As the pirate ships pulled back to what they thought was a safe distance, Dr. Vels's voice crackled over the communication system with urgent news. Marcus, we have a problem. The fake energy signatures are starting to degrade faster than expected. The pirates will figure out they've been tricked within the next 20 minutes. Marcus felt his stomach drop. They had bought themselves time, but not nearly enough. The real Imperial fleet was still over an hour away, and once the pirates realized there were no draconian warships protecting the station, they would likely return with even more anger and determination. What are our options? Marcus asked, looking around the command center at the mix of human, alien, and draconian faces. General Thane stepped forward, his scales dark with concern. We could prepare for a fighting retreat. The station has some defensive capabilities, and we might be able to hold them off long enough. Or, Zara said, her scales shifting to a thoughtful amber color, We could make them believe that attacking us would be too costly even without the Imperial fleet. Marcus looked at the eldest hatchling with interest. What do you mean? Pirates are in this business to make profit, Keth explained, picking up on his sister's thought. If we can convince them that they'll lose more than they gain by attacking us, they might decide it's not worth the risk. Nix, the youngest but often the most insightful, added quietly, we need to make them afraid of us personally. Not just our father's fleet. Commander Vex looked confused. How can 3 hatchlings and a research station crew make experienced pirates afraid? By showing them what Draconian royalty are really capable of when they're properly motivated, Marcus said, beginning to understand the hatchlings' plan. And by demonstrating that humans can be just as dangerous as any other species when protecting something they care about. The next part of their strategy was even more audacious than the first. Marcus coordinated with Dr. Vels to prepare the station's scientific equipment for purposes it had never been designed for, while the hatchlings prepared to show Captain Vork exactly why the Draconian Empire was feared throughout the galaxy. Captain Vork, Marcus said, reopening the communication channel, I hope you're not planning to do anything foolish. The pirate captain appeared on screen again, his expression more confident now that his ships were at a safer distance. Research station. Our scanners indicate that your Imperial escort isn't quite what it appeared to be. Prepare to be boarded. Before you do that, Zara said, stepping into view, perhaps you'd like a demonstration of why attacking Draconian royalty is considered suicide in most civilized systems. The view screen split to show both the pirate, captain, and a view of the station's main laboratory. Marcus had positioned cameras to capture what was about to happen, while Dr. Vels had prepared a series of demonstrations using the station's most advanced scientific equipment. Behold, Keth announced dramatically, the power that flows in the blood of the Imperial family. What happened next was a carefully choreographed display that combined draconian natural abilities with human scientific innovation. Zara breathed a stream of fire that was channeled through a series of focusing crystals, creating a beam of energy that vaporized a chunk of metal in seconds. Keth used his natural electromagnetic abilities to overload several pieces of equipment, creating spectacular electrical displays. Nyx demonstrated her precise control over gravitational fields, causing objects to float and dance through the air. But the most impressive part of the demonstration was how Marcus had enhanced their natural abilities using human technology. The focusing crystals amplified Zara's fire breath into something that could cut through starship hulls. Keth's electrical control was channeled through power conduits to create defensive energy shields. Nyx's gravity manipulation was linked to the station's structural systems, allowing her to literally reshape sections of the station's interior. As you can see, Marcus said calmly while the demonstrations continued, the station is now effectively a weapons platform controlled by 3 very powerful and very angry young Draconians. They've been learning about human military tactics and they're eager to put their lessons into practice. Captain Vork's face had gone from confident to horrified as he watched the display. This is impossible. Hatchlings don't have that kind of power. Normal hatchlings don't, Zara replied, her scales now glowing so brightly they were almost blinding. But we're not normal hatchlings. We're the children of Emperor Vorthak, and we've been trained by the best teachers in the galaxy. She gestured toward Marcus, including a human who has shown us how to think strategically about using our abilities. The demonstration continued for several more minutes, with each hatchling showing off increasingly impressive feats of power and control. Marcus had spent weeks helping them understand their own capabilities and find new ways to apply them. What the pirates were seeing was the result of combining draconian natural gifts with human innovation and tactical thinking. Furthermore, Nyx added, her quiet voice somehow carrying more menace than her siblings' dramatic displays, we've been in contact with our father's fleet. They have detailed information about your ships, your crew, and your base of operations. Even if you manage to take this station, you'll spend the rest of your very short lives running from Imperial hunters. The psychological pressure was working. Marcus could see panic spreading among the pirate crews as they realized they had stumbled into a situation far beyond their ability to handle. They had expected to raid a defenseless research station, not to face Royal Draconian heirs who had been trained in advanced combat techniques. This is your last chance, Captain Vork, Marcus said firmly. Leave this system immediately, and the young royals might be willing to forget this ever happened. Continue with your attack. and you'll discover exactly why the Draconian Empire has never been successfully invaded." The silence stretched for nearly a full minute. Marcus could feel everyone in the command center holding their breath as they waited for the pirate captain's response. The hatchlings stood behind him, their scales still glowing with contained power, ready to defend their new home and their human mentor. Finally, Captain Vork spoke, his voice hollow with defeat. "Red Claw Raiders, prepare for immediate jump to hyperspace. We're leaving this system and never coming back." "Wise choice," Zara said with satisfaction. "And Captain, if we ever encounter you or your crew again, we won't be so merciful." The pirate ships began to accelerate away from the station, their engines glowing as they prepared to jump to hyperspace. Within minutes they had vanished into the void, leaving the research station in peaceful silence. As the immediate danger passed, Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. They had managed to drive off 7 pirate ships using nothing but bluff, creativity, and the natural abilities of 3 young Draconians who had learned to trust in human ingenuity. "Marcus," Nick said softly, moving to stand beside him, "thank you for teaching us that we could be strong without being cruel. And thank you for showing us that real power comes from protecting others, not just dominating them," Keth added. Zara wrapped one scaled arm around Marcus in a gentle hug. "You saved us by teaching us to save ourselves." General Thane watched this display of affection with amazement. "I have never seen anything like this," he said quietly to Commander Vex. "They fought like seasoned warriors, but with compassion and restraint. This human has changed them in ways I didn't think were possible." The arrival of the Imperial fleet 2 hours later was both a relief and the beginning of a new set of complications. 3 massive Draconian battleships emerged from hyperspace, their dark hulls bristling with weapons and their engines glowing like small stars. The lead ship was the Eternal Flame, Emperor Vorthak's personal flagship. Marcus stood in the docking bay with the hatchlings, General Thane and the rest of the Draconian delegation as they prepared to meet the Emperor. The young royals had been unusually quiet since the pirate attack, and their scales had taken on subdued colors that Marcus had learned meant they were deep in thought. "Are you nervous about seeing your father?" Marcus asked Zara quietly. Her golden scales flickered with uncertainty. "We disobeyed protocols during the attack. We acted without permission from our guards. Father might be angry. You saved everyone on this station," Marcus pointed out. "That should count for something." "Draconian royalty are expected to follow orders and maintain dignity," Keth explained. "We did neither. We improvised, we took risks, and we worked as equals with non-Draconians." Nyx looked up at Marcus with her large, intelligent eyes. "What if Father decides we've been corrupted by human influence? What if he takes us away from here immediately?" The fear in her voice was unmistakable, and Marcus realized that the hatchlings were more afraid of losing their newfound freedom to think and act independently than they were of their father's disapproval. "Your father sent you here to learn," Marcus said gently. "Today you proved that you've learned valuable lessons about cooperation, strategy, and leadership. Any parent would be proud of that." The docking bay doors opened with a hiss and Emperor Vorthak entered with a small entourage of advisors and guards. The Emperor was massive even by Draconian standards, his scales a deep purple-black that seemed to absorb light. His eyes glowed like molten gold, and when he moved, there was no doubt that he was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The hatchlings immediately fell into formal bows, their scales shifting to respectful neutral colors. Marcus bowed as well, though he wasn't sure of the proper protocol for greeting an alien emperor. "My children," Emperor Vorthak rumbled, his voice deep and resonant. "You are unharmed?" "Yes, Father," Zara replied formally. "We are well." The Emperor's golden gaze swept over the assembled group, lingering on Marcus with particular interest. "And this is the human supervisor who coordinated your defense?" "This is Marcus Chen, Father," Keith said, stepping slightly forward. "He has been our teacher and our friend." Marcus noticed the slight hesitation before the word friend, as if Keth wasn't sure whether it was appropriate to use such a term when speaking to the Emperor. "Indeed," Emperor Vorthak said, moving closer to Marcus. Even though the Emperor wasn't trying to be intimidating, his sheer size and presence made Marcus feel very small. "I have heard interesting reports about your methods, human Marcus." "Your Majesty," Marcus said, hoping his voice sounded steadier than he felt. Your children are exceptional students. They have natural abilities that, when properly guided, make them formidable allies and leaders. Properly guided, the Emperor repeated thoughtfully. General Thane, report. General Thane stepped forward and gave a detailed account of the events since the hatchlings' arrival at the station. He described their initial resistance to traditional teaching methods, their transformation after Marcus's intervention, and their performance during the pirate attack. They refused to follow established protocols, General Thane concluded, but their improvised strategy was effective beyond anything we could have planned using traditional methods. Emperor Vorthak listened to the entire report without interruption, his expression unreadable. When General Thane finished, the Emperor turned his attention back to the hatchlings. "Show me," he commanded simply. The hatchlings looked confused. "Father?" Zara asked. "Show me what you have learned. Demonstrate these new abilities and strategies that impressed the general." What followed was a remarkable display that combined everything the hatchlings had learned during their time at the station. They worked together as a team, using their individual strengths to complement each other. Zara's fire control was precise and powerful, enhanced by the focusing techniques Marcus had taught her. Keth's electrical abilities were channeled through improvised conductors to create defensive barriers. Nyx used her gravity manipulation to create complex three-dimensional tactical displays in the air. But more impressive than their individual abilities was how they communicated and coordinated their efforts. They had learned to think as a unit while still maintaining their individual personalities and strengths. "Fascinating," Emperor Vorthak murmured as the demonstration concluded. "In 3 months you have achieved coordination that typically takes our military units years to develop." "Marcus taught us that our differences make us stronger when we work together," Nyx explained. "He showed us that cooperation isn't weakness, it's a force multiplier." The Emperor's golden eyes fixed on Marcus again. "Force multiplier? A human military concept, I believe." "Yes, Your Majesty," Marcus replied. "The idea that combining different abilities and perspectives can create results greater than the sum of individual efforts." "And you believe this applies to my children's education?" Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could determine not only his own future but the future of the hatchlings' education. "Your Majesty, your children have incredible natural gifts. But what makes them truly special is their capacity for growth, empathy, and strategic thinking. They don't just follow orders. They understand the reasons behind the orders and can adapt when situations change." Emperor Vorthak was quiet for a long moment, studying his children and their human teacher. The silence stretched until Marcus began to worry that he had overstepped some important boundary. Finally, the Emperor spoke. "My children, do you wish to continue your education here?" The response was immediate and unanimous. "Yes, Father," all 3 hatchlings said together, their scales brightening with hope. "And you, human Marcus," the Emperor continued, "would you be willing to continue supervising their education?" Marcus looked at the 3 young draconians who had become so important to him. Despite the challenges and complications, he couldn't imagine abandoning them now. "It would be my honor, Your Majesty," Marcus replied. Emperor Vorthak nodded slowly. "Then it will be so. However, there will be conditions. This station will receive additional security. My children's education will be expanded to include advanced diplomatic and military training. And you, human Marcus, will be granted the title of Royal Tutor, with all the responsibilities and protections that position entails." The implications of what the Emperor was saying slowly sank in. Marcus was being formally inducted into the draconian imperial hierarchy, making him responsible for the education of the future leaders of one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "I'm honored by your trust, but I should point out that I'm just a research station supervisor. I don't have formal training in royal education or diplomatic protocol." Emperor Vorthak's expression shifted into what Marcus realized was the draconian equivalent of a smile. "Human Marcus, you have accomplished something that our most experienced tutors could not. You have taught my children to think independently while maintaining their sense of duty and honor. That is exactly the kind of education they need to lead the Empire into a new age of galactic cooperation." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the expanded education center of the research station, watching his students prepare for their final presentation. The station had been transformed since Emperor Vorthak's visit. With new security systems, diplomatic facilities, and educational resources that made it one of the most advanced learning centers in the galaxy. The hatchlings had grown significantly, both physically and intellectually. Zara now stood almost as tall as Marcus, her golden scales having developed intricate patterns that marked her approaching adulthood. Keth had grown broader and more muscular, his blue scales now bearing the silver markings of a future military leader. Nyx remained the smallest, but her dark scales had begun to show hints of deep purple that indicated exceptional intellectual development. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked them as they made final preparations for their presentation to a gathering of galactic dignitaries. "We're ready," Zara replied confidently. "But are you sure this is going to work?" The presentation they were about to give would demonstrate everything they had learned about interspecies cooperation. But it was also Marcus's attempt to solve a larger problem that had been developing throughout the galaxy. Other species had begun requesting similar educational programs for their own young leaders, but there was resistance from traditionalist factions who saw human teaching methods as a threat to established cultural norms. "The important thing is that you present your ideas clearly and honestly," Marcus said. "Let the results speak for themselves." The main conference hall was packed with representatives from dozens of different species. Emperor Vorthak sat in the place of honor, but Marcus noticed that the Emperor's attention was focused entirely on his children, rather than on the impressive gathering of dignitaries. Dr. Vels, who had been promoted to Director of Interspecies Education for the sector, introduced the presentation. "Distinguished guests, what you are about to see represents a new model for preparing young leaders for the challenges of galactic citizenship." The hatchlings took the stage with confidence that would have been unimaginable when they first arrived at the station. They had prepared a comprehensive demonstration of their abilities, but more importantly, they were going to present their own analysis of what they had learned and how it could be applied to other species. "Honored delegates," Zara began, her voice clear and strong. "When we arrived at this station, we believed that strength meant dominance, that leadership meant giving orders, and that cooperation was a sign of weakness. We were wrong," Keth continued. "Over the past months, we have learned that true strength comes from understanding. Real leadership means inspiring others to achieve their best, and cooperation is the foundation of all great achievements." The audience listened intently as the hatchlings described their transformation. They spoke about learning to see other species as equals rather than inferiors, about discovering that asking questions was more valuable than pretending to know everything, and about finding that working together produced better results than working alone. But the real impact came when they demonstrated their practical applications. Working as a team, they solved a complex diplomatic scenario that had been puzzling galactic negotiators for months. They showed how combining draconian strength, human creativity, and insights from other species could create solutions that no single culture could achieve alone. "This is what we call the multiplication effect," Nyx explained, using holographic displays to illustrate their points. "When different species work together with mutual respect and understanding, the result is exponentially greater than what any single group could accomplish." The presentation continued for over an hour, with the hatchlings fielding questions from the audience and demonstrating their problem-solving techniques. Marcus watched from the side of the stage, proud of how far they had come, but also nervous about how the audience was responding. The reaction was mixed. Some delegates were clearly impressed, while others seemed skeptical or even hostile. A representative from the hegemony faction stood up during the question period. "This is all very impressive," the delegate said. "But how do we know these methods will work with other species? Draconians are naturally powerful and intelligent. These results might not be replicable." Before Marcus could respond, Zara stepped forward. "Honored delegate, that question demonstrates exactly the kind of thinking that limits galactic progress. Every species has unique strengths and capabilities. The goal isn't to make every species identical. It's to help each species reach its full potential while learning to work effectively with others." "Furthermore," Keith added, "we've been working with students from 6 other species over the past 3 months. The preliminary results show that these methods are effective across a wide range of cultural and biological differences." The hegemony delegate looked surprised. "Other species? This wasn't mentioned in the briefing materials." Nyx smiled, her scales shifting to a pleased purple. because we wanted to prove the effectiveness before announcing it. Marcus taught us that actions speak louder than words. What followed was a series of presentations by young representatives from the Centaurian Republic, the Crystalline Collective, the Aquatic Federation, and 3 other major civilizations. Each group had spent time at the research station, learning the same principles of cooperation and critical thinking that had transformed the draconian hatchlings. The results were remarkable. The young Centaurians had developed new forms of artistic expression that combined their natural telepathic abilities with techniques learned from other species. The crystalline representatives had created innovative solutions to resource distribution problems. The aquatic delegates had designed new forms of environmental restoration that could work across different planetary types. "This is unprecedented," murmured the ambassador from the Galactic Council, an elderly being whose species Marcus didn't recognize. "In 6 months, these young beings have made more progress on intractable problems than our best negotiators have achieved in years." Emperor Vorthak stood up, his massive presence commanding immediate attention from the entire assembly. "Distinguished colleagues, what you have witnessed today is the future of galactic civilization. My children have not lost their draconian heritage. They have enhanced it by learning from others and sharing their knowledge in return. The question before us," the Emperor continued, "is whether we will embrace this new model of education and cooperation, or whether we will cling to the old ways that have kept our species isolated and limited." The debate that followed was intense, with representatives arguing about cultural preservation, educational philosophy, and the risks of rapid change. Marcus found himself called upon to defend the methods he had developed, explaining how human approaches to learning could be adapted to different species without destroying their unique characteristics. "The goal has never been to make other species more human," Marcus explained to the assembly. "The goal is to help every species become the best version of themselves while developing the skills needed to work effectively in a diverse galactic community." The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Marcus had hoped, but decisive enough to matter. The Galactic Council approved the establishment of similar educational programs throughout their territory, with the research station serving as the primary training center for instructors from different species. As the assembly dispersed, Marcus found himself surrounded by the hatchlings, who had reverted to their old habit of clustering around him whenever they were excited or nervous. "We did it," Zara said, her scales glowing bright gold with satisfaction. "We actually convinced them." "You did it," Marcus corrected. "I just gave you the tools. You 3 were the ones who proved that cooperation and understanding could work." "We couldn't have done it without you," Keth insisted. "You showed us that being strong doesn't mean being alone." Nyx looked up at Marcus with eyes that now held the wisdom that came from real experience. "Marcus, will you stay and help train the new instructors? This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Marcus looked around at the young beings from different species who were already planning their next collaborative projects, at the adults who were discussing new possibilities for galactic cooperation, and at the 3 draconian hatchlings who had become like family to him. "Yes," he said with a smile, "this is definitely just the beginning." Emperor Vorthak approached their group, his expression showing what Marcus had learned to recognize as parental pride. "Human Marcus, you have given my children something I could never provide. The knowledge that they can be both proud draconians and citizens of a larger galactic community." "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, "they taught me just as much as I taught them. They showed me that the future of the galaxy isn't about any single species dominating the others. It's about all of us learning to reach our potential together." The Emperor nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed. And now, thanks to their example, that future has truly begun." As Marcus watched the hatchlings excitedly planning their next learning adventure with students from other species, he realized that what had started with a simple hug during a moment of fear had grown into something, and they still refused to leave his Sid.